Horohoro, that's where our pepea is. Ko hororo te maunga, Ngati Tuara, Ngati Tuara, te hapu. So I've always held on to that. That's all that was just the music I heard. And then he would point out places, but he was, I guess he was out of bounds to us. Our kuia was the one that would spend time with us. So the only time he would come up to Horohoro was when he'd ring Mum and tell Mum, I'm going out to see your kuia at Waimaruru. I'll come up there today. And he would get there on Darky's bus, and at the house, he'd just go and grab the bridle, shake the bridle, and his horse would come up to him. Put his bridle onto the horse, put his saddle on, just a piece of wagon wheel, and he'd go off to sea, go through the bush, round towards Hariata's place, up onto the valley, up to where the Kakariki is, and then ride over to Waimaruru. And he'd be out overnight and then come back. And he'd say to her, "Te oha isn't hunted well, because I saw some pig tracks there." And Mum would say, "Well then, I'll get Dad to go out there." And, you know, like we were always told, if you went up into the Mamakus to hunt and you missed out on the catch, always go there to Te oha. But if you get there and you catch a pig and it's starting to get dark, you will sleep there. And you will cook some of the ate and leave it as a oha to the urukehu. What did that tell us when we were told as young? When it's dark, get the heck out of there. We didn't want to put up with any of that. But you know, we never tested the kōrero that they had and what they shared. And so I do remember that. And he came back one time, and this was in 1957. And he asked my mum, "What does trespass mean?" And Mum said, "Oh, you're on someone's land without permission. But that's where your kuia is buried." You know, and when Mum told us, "Your koro doesn't know what trespass means," you know, we sort of chuckled. We were young, we knew what it was. But he'd never experienced that in his life. And you don't understand the hurt that he would have been going through, going on to Forest Products land, where they once lived in a distant part. And so you start remembering and recalling places. He would talk about aramaka and bird snaring. He'd talk about other places.
Do you know where that is, Aramaka?
Aramaka is on top of Horohoro. And it kind of, there was a big village at one stage. And when I first went up there with Dad, he said, "This is the tree your koro was talking about. This is where he would put his snare and catch pigeons." We were taught how to set the snare and how to lure the pigeons to the snare. And he, you know, like, he never ever said to us things like, "We're not allowed to take these." Because at that time, the bad habit of shooting them came about. All I do remember was Dad would say, "Use this as your art of catching it. Because if any ranger catches you, you don't have a shotgun and you won't be able to find any holes on the bird. For your safety, be cautious." And it's those type of kōrero. I was fortunate as well to hear other kaua, you know, share kōrero with me and point out the valleys up on Horohoro as names. I would never remember the names now. I mean, say thank goodness for your mum and calling that area Pariwhaiti, because those are the ancient names that people that we have to bring back so that another generation can live and work with those names. I don't even know where the house is, the old house used to be, if there was a name for that place, because there would have been. All I do recall was how different places were pointed out as where the stagecoach track was. And, you know, I would say personally, probably that's why our marae was first established there. It was beside the stagecoach track. And of course, like Pariwhaiti was part and parcel of the walk from here over to Wairepo, and then up on to Tihiotonga. I have to say, I'd heard bits of the kōrero of Tihiotonga because Dad told me that the kaumatua would come out into the kitchen and go, you, and you, take the horses and get some trout. And he said they go down there and two in the stream throwing the trout out, two on the bank knocking them on the head, putting it into the horse's, pack and whacking the horse so the horse comes back to here. And the cooks would take the fish off, clean them down. By the time they got back here, the fish were hanging and getting smoked. What a life to live with. There's some art in what they were been teaching them, what is even taught at that time.
That was when Ari used to tell me a lot. He actually told me about the Sunset Road, how the site started from Pukehangi, Tarewa, Sunset Road, and went right up to Pukehangi. And he told me about the urupa up there, and the par site. He said there was a par site there, and water. He said there's a lot of water there everywhere. And he said springs. He said he had actually walked it, but he didn't take me up there to do it. He had actually done the walk. I said, oh, okay.
We were putting names together for the different properties. And your dad had said to me, this has always been, and the name of this area here. He says, think of a name for here. Think of a name for here. And I said, actually, the name should be Ngarahu, because that was Paiaka's wife. And the land comes from Ngarahu, because that's the tūmahaurangi whakapapatu there. And I said, but from what I understand, and I says, Paiaka was our builder. And I can attribute to him building our other par sites up in Mamaku. But Whenua definitely was one of his landmarks. And Robin, I have to say that came from a kōrero, and John Verker and I were talking. And then he said to me, anyone who's from Taharangi and Tūmahaurangi are up in that area. And he said, because you fellas there are from Paiaka. I said, that's right. He said, well, Paiaka married Ngāmama. Ngāmama was in Itai and all that stuff, And I, oh, wow. And then he started talking about it. And then he said, you fellas, your urupa there is at Pukehangi. Yeah? And then there was that kōrero around the urupa and everything there. So him and I and Arama Pirika went and stood by the fence, straight opposite Sunset Road one day. It was lunchtime, and then this car stopped. And the woman said to me, can I help you? And I says, No. I says, we're just looking up top there. She says, do you know what you're looking at? Yeah, the par site. And she says, so you must be from here. What's your name? And I said, Eru George. Oh, I know Eru George. And that was my dad she was talking about. That was Brian Gillam's wife. And I didn't realise that she was a car. And she said to me, yep, all this area here is your land. And then she started talking. And at the end of Sunset Road, there's a road going up to some houses. That's where that's where her house was. And so when she started talking like that, she said to me, we'd like to talk with you because we would like to know a little bit more about that urupa. And that's when, your dad and I would be working around different things. And then finding out, of course, that that's where, some of our tupuna are buried. And then you find out there's people buried on top of paparata. They make you say, is that paparata or is it paparata? And I think that's what we have to sort of do the research to get the depth of the kōrero. And then John Verco would talk about that, from Karamu Tākina. He didn't go into details, and which was strange for him, so he probably didn't know the detail of Karamu Tākina. All he said to me was about the 2 springs there, and there's only 1 spring that's being used. I didn't know the value of it at that time until your dad would talk about different things, and I thought, heck. And then he started talking about the detail of it. And then you realise how some of our neighbours were unkind to us. And Mr. Dillon was one of them. But, that's just what life's all about, Robin. We had to try and work around how we can salvage the best of what we've got and build up a history that's to the land, from the land, for our people.
That was my more of an introduction to Horohoro. But I want to go back to some time earlier when I can remember Rātoru and Ihaya Patikura walking over the back of the hill here behind Keroa and coming to the marae. My brother Derek had one day at Horohoro School, so he got his registration onto the school jubilee list. And I can only surmise that the reason we were at Keroa was our auntie had passed away. And the auntie is Tawhiri. She had married Patu Raharuhi. And her sister, Huhana, had married Foley Eru. So that's the reason I can think of that we were at Keroa. But anyway, fast forward, and we go to around about, the 50s, the early 50s. My cousin Marama said to me, we go to Horohoro. And I said, oh, no, I'm not coming up. I'm real stick in the mud. He said, come on, man, we go. So anyway, long story, we both came to Horohoro on the, what we call the Tokero bus. And we had a crowd from Tokero Otaramarae that came up to Horohoro. I didn't know what was going on, but anyway, we get up here, there's a big crowd up here. And they were waiting for the minister to come. And the Minister for Māori Affairs at the time was blank. No, it was Corbett. He was the Minister of Māori Affairs, was Corbett. So anyway, there's a big pōhiri here, no kids here. And I thought, hey, this is a funny place, not many kids here. Now anyway, got on with the pōhiri. The guy that did the crower that did the wero was Haira. Kirimawa Haira. He did the wero. And he was tall guy, eh? So he went out, did the wero ka hoki mai, did the pōhiri. And then kamuti te Tawhiri, then they sat down to talk business. And I can remember Kirimawa getting up and saying to Corbett, we want our land back. We want to run our own land. Oh, yeah, they went through one year and straight out the other. But the thing was, around about 1954, or 50, well, it would have been in the 50s, that talk was going about returning the land back to the shareholders. So obviously Kirimawa really stirred up something, although it must have been in the pot as well. But as well as that, I believe it was the opening of the church. I believe, and somebody can correct me along the way. And that was my second time to Horohoro.
We would hear the thunder of flames over the back of Horohoro. And I'd ask them, what's that noise? And they'd say, forest products are burning all the native behind Horohoro. And then they'd say, what they didn't burn, they turned into a special character area. And I thought, I said, why did they do that? Oh, you'll find out as you grow older. And it's those sort of things. I did know where the basin was. I did know where Matahana was, because we had to walk to Matahana to go over toward another part of Waimaruru. And when I say walk, we were getting older then, and so we were learning about going out there and hunting, but we didn't venture too far from the mountain, because we only caught for the pot. We didn't go out there to get bounties. And all Dad had said to us, leave them there because we can't cater for 3 pigs. We didn't have the fridge or freezer to care for them. So we lived with the safe hanging on a fruit tree. And it's those sort of things. Our water tank was one of the cattle troughs, and so the amount of water that you captured was limited. But the water would run into the house. We had a copper, and we'd light the cooker, the fire. And it acted as wetback to get the water boiling. And so as kids, we learned to work from the copper and a bucket of cold water from the trough, 2 buckets of cold water and a bucket of hot water. Your head's in there, wash first, jump in there, 2 of you jump in there, soap, and jump out, and the next 2 were lining up for there. And because you just had that corrugated, not corrugated, but that type of tub to bath in. And that's what we were brought up with. We knew that to survive, you had to get some firewood in and then use that to keep your fire going so that Mum had somewhere to cook the meals. And so Mum taught us how to cook. Mum taught us how to bake. And so we had to be self-sufficient. Dad taught us about how to maintain the fencing, and watch the stock that they had to be moved. Watch them especially when they're lambing and calving, even the horses. And so he was always clear that we shouldn't have too many horses there because it takes too much food from the stock. And we were being taught all those things as far as farm management was concerned. But he didn't want us to put too much of an effort in that. He felt that we had to get out and then learn life as young adults to be able to make a living for you into the future.
My earliest memories of here at Horohoro was Mum and I coming up to the farm when my Uncle Johnny and his wife Kohutapu, who belonged to Ngati Manua, were on the farm, and he used to come and pick us up, and we'd spend the weekend with him on the farm. And my earliest memories was down at the cow shed. The only hot water we had was in the cow shed. The cows were more important than us up at the cottage, and they had a little trough there that, and I used to have a bath in the trough. I have many memories of Horohoro when I was a child. The original owner of the farm at Horohoro was my kuia Ngahaka, and I say she put her name in to be balloted for a farm for her son Johnny Ingram. Now, in my Ingram family, there were Jimmy Ingram and Ngahaka had 8 children. There were 7 daughters and 1 boy, and Johnny was her heart. And so she put her name in a ballot for the farm just for her son Johnny. And they started on the farm before the war. And unfortunately, he was killed during the war, but the family kept on running the farm, you know, all these years, and we still own it today. Uncle Johnny, being the only son, when Mum got pregnant, Johnny said to her, "What do you call it? What do you call your son? If it's, you know, if you have a boy, what are you going to call him?" And she said, "Manahi." He said, "You can't use that name. I'm going to use it for my son." And Mum said, "Well, you know what you can do." Anyway, she carried on, and my Uncle Johnny wouldn't speak to her for a couple of years until he came to visit his mother at Tarewa one time. Mum and I was there, and I was a little fellow running around. When he saw me, he just picked me up and gave me happy, and that's when we started coming back to Horohoro. And as it turned out, he and Kohutapu were here living on the farm, and Uncle Johnny had 3 daughters. He never had a son.
Because I remember a cow shed being just along from where Kero is now in the Crowa's land there, before you go down into a dip. And that's where they had the milking shed in the 40s, like late 30s to 40s. Because I remember Uncle Ngātaima coming here. Well, he said he came here during the war, the 28 Battalion War. He was sent here by his mother to help the kuia and the Crowa, because all the uncles had gone to war. So he was sent here to help the kuia and the Crowa. And that was the milking shed they had, was up just by Kero, where Kero used to be.
And tell us about the urupa up there. When did that get started?
Oh, that'll probably be about the 40s, because the first one that was there, that is buried there, is Uncle Mickey, who was Kui and Koro's eldest son. He was the one, and I'm not sure whether he had, what's that disease that used to go around with cows, you know?
TB?
TB. He died of TB, yeah. And he was the first one up there. And then I think the Crow and my mother were the next ones after that.
And you still look after that?
Yes, we still look after that place, yes.
Is it still open? Like, are you still putting people?
Oh yes, we still do. Yep, we're still putting people there. Yeah, it's just that it's a bit hard to get to at times. We need to do another road up there, right? Because it's quite hard to get there from the road. Yeah, but no, we still use it. Yes, who was the last one there? Mickey Eru was the last one there. So yep.
Any other sites like around the Happy Farm or any other?
Not that I know of.
The swimming pool.
No, not that I know. Yeah, it's only with the swimming, the river that we used, the school used for swimming pools. That's the only pool we had to swim in. So it was that one over at the lagoon, we called it, and then this one down here. It was used to be quite deep down here. Yeah, so the boys went to the lagoon and the girls came down here to Kero.
for a short while there, he was going up into the bush, into the Mamaku. I had an uncle working on the railway was coming into the bush. And that's where my dad used to meet my uncle up in the bush. And that's through Te Oha, where my dad used to ride his horse and leave his horse there until the work was finished right up on the plateau of the Mamakus.
Do you know where the track was?
Yeah.
Where they went? Oh, yeah.
So he was there for a short while, and then he started working at the Waipa mill, like all the other farmers around Horohoro.
We spent a lot of our times on the farm, walking the farms, to the point that we even walked to Mamaku through the bush, where the forestry, Mamaku had a mill called State Mill in Mamaku, who milled all the big millable trees in our forest over in the back there. So we used to go up there, and they used to have all the jiggers coming from Mamaku Mill and dragging the logs back. So we would catch a ride on that. My eldest sister, Hannah, married Armstrong Poe, and he was able to get work up there, working in the forest, the bush up in the back of the Mamakus there. So he was good. So they quite often had to walk up in the bush, but it was good for us. We would be able to go and do a bit of pig hunting over there, but pretty tough walking though. You climb, yes.
How long did it take to get to Mamaku?
Up to Mamaku? Well, it took us all day. It took us all day, but if we catch a jigger that was going back to Mamaku, it would only take us maybe half a day to be able to get there. But then we have to wait until next morning to come back on when they come to work. But that was part of our growing up times here in Rotorua.
Pariwhaiti, e kore ana taku kraua mō tērā maunga, e ne wāhi I noho ai ngā tangata hare mai, ne e hiwi kei reira, e tanu mia ngā koiwi o tātou pakeke, koeke. I don't know who they are, but kore ana taku kraua I hea. E kore rani mō rātau. Ana ka hare mai I te Mamaku, tika tonu I te taha o tātou maunga o Horohoro. Ana ka hare etahi ki Lavin, Foxton, ngā kāinga o rātau. Ka wehe mai etahi I te wautu, ne, etahi o ngā hapu, ana, ko nuku rātau, ki reira, e whakarongo ana hau ki ana kōrero. Hea te ka whakaro koe ne ngā tāngata I runga te pāmu ne, ko Ngati, ngā ingoa o te wautu. Kei runga katoa I te pāmu, ne, ka whakaro au, how and when I hare mai rātou ki reira, you know. Kari I kore mai e taku kraua mō tērā. E ha te take e tahi o ngā owners ne I runga te pāmu. Nā ki raukawa ne katoa. Ai. Ana, ka mahi taku kraua, ka hare mai tētahi tangata, pirangi ki te mahi I te puhi, you know, where the maunga is e Pariwhaiti. Well, I reira katoa e mahi ana ngā tangata, I mahi I te puhi, I te rawa. Ana, ka hare mai te rori, right in the middle o te pāmu. Ai. And if I can remember, e kore ana taku kraua ki a rātou, as long as they supply ngā wahia, they were allowed to go through free. Back then. Ngā tangata mai. Kei te whakaroa I te ingoa o te tangata nei, Monroe, I think it was. Te tangata whakahaere ne, a Monroe. Ko ia te tangata I mahi ngā paina I raro nei. Mo te Akeroa. Yeah. That's back then, if I remember. Ko ia Monroe. Ai.
And then all of a sudden we started venturing over to Pariwhaiti because we were going hunting in that area, the swamps there, where the Bushmen had their whānau in where treetops are now. I caught my first pig where the front door of treetops is. You know, when I got in there, yeah, I remember this place. But those were just the experiences that you had. Dad never allowed us to use the dogs. But what did we hear when he left? Don't take the dogs. He just, let's go for a walk, bro, and went out and tried your luck. I don't know much about that, and I don't even know, you know, like where the village was up there. If there was a village there would have been probably a village there because there was that swamp down the back there that we used to go and get watercress, and that would have been a decent stream at that time, running round and down through Te Oha, well, when I say Te Oha, in the farm, down to Hariata's place, and then back this way here. And it's quite funny when you think about it going the long way around as far as looking at it. But as we would go out hunting, Taki would say to me, that place up there is such and such. Because Mickey Eru was told a story by our koro Bill Happy. And they would be out there hunting, and he'd say, oh, over here is such and such, over here is such and such. So as I was, my dad had died, and I was talking with Mickey Eru on a regular basis, just to get some kōrero from what he knew. And I have to say, that's where I captured a lot of the kōrero.
Then there's Te Kakariki Potiki. And the only thing that I can remember why it became a cemetery is that a tupuna kraua, my father never ever, as I said, he wouldn't talk about whakapapa, but he said that there was an old man who lived in a kauta up there, just a small hut type of kauta, and it burnt. And they just, where it burnt, where he died, that became the cemetery. So that's how that developed into a wahi tapu for us, and why our father has always maintained that as Wahi Tapu, te Kakariki Potiki. I'm not sure, but that my younger brother is buried there. I am not sure where, well, like I said, my father hardly ever spoke, where my older brother is buried. I thought they said that he might have been buried in the one at, the only other place is the one at Tarewa Road. And I'm not sure what's the name of that place, but we have urupa there. And I can remember my father asking us as young boys to go and help him, because a lot of the older cemeteries in town were built in, vaults were built for them. And that one, a lot of the vaults were broken through, gorse growing through them. He ended up having to, we had to break them and bury them all. So he asked us, and I probably would have been about 18, to go there at midnight on a Friday night to start burying those vaults. So we, quite a few of us young fellas said, oh, well, he'll be the only one there at midnight for sure. So he compromised, and we went there at 6 in the morning. And it took us, a good 6-8 hours to bury them all. We're lucky one of our nephews worked in road construction, and he was able to get the use of a front digger, and we dug a big trench and just used it and just picked up the whole vaults and just buried them and made them, and then in that way we were able to clear up that cemetery. So whoever was in there, I have no idea. Although the vault that's still there, I think Manahi has all the knowledge of those. But the rest of them, they are now buried in the ground. Although I do know is that Utupaoa is there in the mountain somewhere, and he was caught on his way back to Hawaii or wherever. He came as one of those tanifas who brought the fire to Ngati. He was one of them. On his return trip, he didn't make it and ended up in Horohoro. Daylight caught him, and that's he's still there in Utupaoa.